everybody. I'm trying to be more hyped today for you guys because I got bitched at by Daniel, who is fortunately not on this episode of Tim's 2 Cents. This is episode 10, if you've been following at all. It's not that many to do so far, and I'm already kind of like, okay, what exactly do I talk about? But I figure something out pretty much every week. Last week I did despotism, trying to figure out what exactly, or maybe the positives of that, and then just kind of listing the negatives, which are a lot easier to come by. But if you haven't listened to this before, this is basically a podcast where I try to go through different isms, different belief systems, different ways of structuring your life and structuring what you hope to succeed at by different ways of thinking. Everybody has their own kind of code, or whether it's like an organized religion or an organized political system, or if it's something more nebulous, kind of like just in general, like Stoicism, or, I mean, where it used to be a more like organized school of thought, and now it's a little bit more free form, and people can kind of just pick and choose what they want. But basically, the idea is I'm trying to find the best stuff, the things that make the most sense out of different belief systems and different ideas and different ideologies. Try to find the little nuggets of what is true, what is helpful from those, and try to get rid of all the extra dogma and just kind of useless talk that kind of surrounds most things, especially organized things, where they kind of have to have little bits of added stuff to prop up certain parts of them that don't, at least on the surface, make sense, and then they say that they make sense by tying them into this. But like I said, Daniel's not on this episode. Before I start any of this, I do want to say you can find us every Thursday nights on the You, Me, and BTC podcast, every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. We do a live show. If you'd rather listen to somebody having a conversation with somebody else, we do have guests sometimes, but normally we at least have two people there with two hosts, either Daniel or I, and then also we have Zach on, Zach Vol. So normally you'll get at least three people, sometimes more. Sometimes, like I said, we'll have a guest. We had what was his name? Fuck. He even went on Twitter and tried to get me more followers, which didn't work, I think, as well as he thought it would, because he offered some Bitcoin to people to follow me. Crypto Rick, maybe? I don't really remember. It doesn't really matter for this now, because if you listen to that, you can find him anyway if you're listening to the You, Me, and BTC podcast. But we do, like I said, it's a live show. We have a live chat. If you have questions for us, you can get them answered right away there. You can interact with us right then and there. If you want to interact with mine, or Zach also does a show called The Coin Pod that normally goes out on Tuesdays. If you'd like to interact with either one of those, you have to use Twitter or the comments on wherever you're watching or listening to the episode. Twitter is probably the best way to get to me. It's Bakersdozen93. If you have any comments, complaints, positive thinking about what I've done, maybe if you guys think it did, maybe it helped you, maybe it didn't, maybe I should just shut up. Let me know on Twitter. Let me know if you have any ideas for a next episode. I'm always looking to try to push the work away from myself and make it easier on myself, so I very much welcome that. But again, Zach's come out on Tuesday. Normally this show I'm doing right now comes out on Mondays, maybe Monday night. Maybe Daniel will get it out tonight. Who knows? But then Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, that's kind of our big flagship show where you can get all of us together. So check them out. Check us out there. Also, the reason why we're able to do these extra episodes, we always used to just do You, Me, and BTC, but the reason why we're able to do these extra ones and get paid for it is because of our sponsor, Chronologic, which, if you haven't heard of them before, and if you are interested in Ethereum, they are a way of setting all that up so you can have smart contracts and debt smart contracts specifically, and just... I'm not as much into Ethereum. Well, not as much. I'm not really into Ethereum at all. I don't have any that I remember having, but Bitcoin is more of the like the currency side of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, Ethereum is really where you're starting to see people making contracts that aren't just, well, we're going to sign this, we're going to sign this. It's like a real-time contract, a real-time kind of third-party representative in anything that you want, and it's a lot more reactive and just more tailored to the situation. If you're looking for something where you don't want to involve a traditional type of contract, Ethereum and specifically Chronologic is where you're going to find that, and where, if you are interested in that stuff, you should look. Check them out. Let them know you heard about it here or on any of our shows. Just let them know you heard about it through us. That helps us. That helps them know that their money is going to a place where it actually matters. And it keeps us getting more subscribers, which allows us to bring you guys more content, and then also lets me not have to do this completely for free, which I probably would anyway because my life is pathetic. But anyway, that's actually going against what I'm planning on talking about today, which is optimism. I've had and I might sound particularly down today. That's mostly because of allergies. I'm right in the area I'm in is right in the middle of all the everything kind of just coming up into the air, all the pollen and danders around. So I'm I just constantly look like I'm stoned. I just have red eyes, and I can't really breathe out of my nose, so it sounds a little bit weird, but you're gonna have to deal with it anyway, because we're being optimistic, or at least for the first half of the show, we're going to be optimistic, and we're going to try and figure out why one would go through your life thinking that the best possible thing will happen in any given situation. Now, pretty much since I was a young kid, I've definitely been what people would call a pessimist, very negative, sometimes for no reason, many times because, at least to me, it seemed like it made sense. A lot of times, I don't think that the best possible thing that is to happen is going to happen. That's just not how I see my life working. It's never helped me to just assume the best in any situation, at least, again, not that I can see. But, and I think part of this is not how maybe most people would, what most people would call optimism, but there is this certain kind of, if anybody remembers Pollyanna, which is an old, I don't even remember if it's a book or a movie or whatever, but it's this like little ditzy girl who's just, oh, we're just gonna be happy and everybody's nice and this is just great and it's amazing. This whole, everything's amazing always, the Lego song, everything is awesome. We're kind of in a culture now where everything's going to go great and we're just going to do amazing things, and then this life is going to work out perfectly for all of us, and as long as we just do our best, and even it's just not going to work out. That's, I think, partly that's just the times we live in. I mean, compared to 100 years ago, things are a lot fucking better, so there is something to be said for that. It's a lot easier to be an optimist now than it was back in 1860, whenever you could die from dysentery, you could just die from diarrhea. It's a lot easier to be an optimist whenever like health is not inclining, but increasing, where diseases are going down, all these things are going down, violence is going down, all these things are going down. So it actually does make a little bit more sense to expect the best out of something, but is that really the best way to go through your life? Like I said, I'll start out with the good things about optimism, the good things about having an optimistic outlook, even to the point of just blind optimism, where you just kind of ignore the bad things in your life, you ignore negativity, you ignore all that, and instead just try to replace it with good feelings and thinking that everything will work out and thinking that everything is going to pan out in the best possible way for you. And I mean, the first thing I can think of is that generally I was looking some stuff up before doing the episode, and there's always things in magazines and newspapers about how, well, positive thinking gives longevity or whatever, makes you live longer. Which, if you look at stuff, there's so many different varying studies on that, and studies on whether it helps with pain management or whether it helps with developing diseases or not, where you can say that it's pretty much negligible. Just because you don't think you're going to, just because you think that you're cancer-free doesn't mean you're going to be any more cancer-free than someone who constantly worries about having cancer. Just because you absolutely know that you're never going to get rheumatoid arthritis does not mean that you will not get it, and it doesn't mean that you have any less of a chance of getting it than somebody who worries about it every single day of their life. Things like that don't really work out, but they do say that somebody who has a positive, optimistic outlook will normally have a lower level of cortisol in their blood. And cortisol is a stress hormone. It does things to your body where you can kind of like wear out a little bit quicker. It's not good to have an elevated amount of cortisol. It stops, I believe, it gets in the way of the body's repairing itself and being able to recover from certain things like exercise or just stressful or manual labor or even just stressful situations. So optimism does apparently have normally a good influence on cortisol levels. Now that makes sense because it is a stress hormone, so the more stress you have, the more cortisol you're going to have. If you're able to trick yourself in just being consistently, blindly optimistic about everything, what do you have to be stressed about? Problem is, and I'll go into it later, is what happens whenever something bad does happen and you're not able to continue tricking yourself into thinking that everything is always going to work out in the best possible way. Well-being amongst people, again, is normally reported as higher amongst people who have a optimistic outlook on life. Again, that's kind of self-explanatory. If you think that the best thing is going to happen and you think that the best possible outcome is always going to happen to you, then your whole feeling of what life is and how you're going to deal with it and how things will work out in the end is obviously going to be better. If you think that your life will turn out well, your general feeling in the moment is going to be better than somebody who's worrying about whatever in the coming days. If you think that, hey, I'm going to make this much money this year and I'm not going to have to worry about bills, I'm not going to have to worry about anything like that, your well-being is going to be better than somebody who is constantly, your sense of well-being. I have to put that in there. It's not necessarily that like I said before, your health is going to be any better, but your sense of well-being, your sense of things being okay are going to be higher and going to be better if you just kind of blindly believe that things will be better. That's not that hard of a concept to grasp, and that doesn't really mean anything. That just means that you feel better about something. That doesn't mean anything. That's not a factual approach to anything besides just trying to lessen. Like, I understand the idea there. It's just you are kind of just trying to trick yourself into feeling better, and then the average day will feel better. The other thing about being optimistic, about being even blindly optimistic, is that more opportunities will seem feasible to you, especially in this day and age where we have so much greater wealth and the standard of living is so much higher. Just kind of seeing opportunities and taking them is something that seems to make a difference between people. People who take certain opportunities and take risks and take things outside of their comfort zone. It's easier to do that if you think it's just going to go well. If you think that whether it's approaching a stranger or going for a job interview or going to whatever you're going to be doing, whatever if you're starting a new business, it's more likely, least in my mind. I couldn't necessarily find any data on this, but I would believe it's more likely that the person who is doing those things on the average has a better outlook on life than the person who just thinks, this won't work. Pessimism isn't really conducive to going outside of your comfort zone unless you can tell yourself, hey, I need to do this. This is a calculated risk. This is a good opportunity. And even if it doesn't necessarily work, I need to try. Optimism can, again, trick you into just going with it, just doing something new, just doing whatever it is that is maybe looking scary, is maybe possibly going to fail. And optimism would give you that kind of hope that it's going to work out. I can just try and it's going to work out. That's obviously a better starting point to come from if you want to try new things, if you want to make yourself take more risks and engage in more opportunities. It's going to be better for you if you think that it's going to work out. You're going to be more likely to go through with something if you believe that it will work out and that it is working out. If you believe starting into a business that, hey, this is going to succeed and no matter what happens, it's going to succeed, it's a lot more likely that you start that business than going into it thinking, hey, this probably won't work, but why? I might as well try it. Now, depending upon the individual person, obviously that it can change and as to who actually does it or not and whose business succeeds or not. That all kind of is something completely separate. But as far as making it more likely that you're going to try something like that, the optimist and optimism is going to help you to do that. Also, and this is what I was talking about before, as far as our society, generally people who are like, it's going to do this and it's going to work out right and it's just going to all be good. Generally, people like you better, especially if you're involved with something with them that is dependent on working or not. If it's just your friends, some people like I personally, I like very negative people. Maybe that's not good, but I kind of enjoy bitter or sarcastic gallows type humor where you're just, no, it's not going to work and it's just whatever, but blah, blah, blah. In general, people will normally respond better to an optimist approach. If you're selling something to somebody, if you're part of a venture with somebody else, that other person is obviously going to, or is not necessarily obviously, but is more likely to go along with you and to believe things with you if you believe in them. If you tell someone from the get-go, hey, it might work out, but we can try it, and you're trying to sell them something, like a car salesman. If you go up to whoever's coming in to buy a car and you go, hey, this car, statistically, it just seems like brands don't really matter, and it just one car or another is going to break down, just shit the bed eventually, and you might get a couple years out of it. Or you could pick a good one and then that might last forever, but it's really just kind of a roll of the dice and it just depends on how it was made. Maybe someone at the plant or whatever the fuck they're called, didn't do their job correctly. Maybe something is just a little off, so then the engine damages itself more and more. If you try to be realistic in that situation where, hey, it might work out, it might not, it might do not good at all, they're less likely to buy from you. That's the whole thing of sales, is being optimistic about something and just being the best possible thing will happen. This car is going to be with you till your children are going to be driving this car. Your children are going to conceive their grandchildren in this car. That's a little bit of a stretch, but sometimes maybe that's a good sales point. I don't know. But anyway, in sales, optimism and being able to then trick the other person into just kind of blindly having faith in whatever you're selling them is great. That's a very good asset for somebody who has to sell things, is to have the ability to just go, hey, this is your best option. This is the best thing that you can have. This is the absolute best, and it's always going to work out for you. Because even if somebody comes and complains to you afterwards, most people do not want to be sold something with any kind of a realistic warning beforehand. Most people would much rather be told that it's going to work out great and it's going to be amazing. And that's, I mean, you can just see that. And there aren't very many just negative jingles. There aren't many negative TV commercials. There aren't, if you see a billboard sign, they're not like, hey, yeah, I mean, you're going to get a car someplace. No, it's like, come by the Ford. It's backed by 200 years of tradition and hard American work, even though most of the shit's made in a different country. You're kind of selling them that positivity, and then it makes you feel good to buy stuff. And that gets into a whole other thing. And maybe I'll do an episode on just the general culture of consumerism we live in, but definitely for selling things and for getting other people to go along with you with things, it is very helpful to be optimistic and to preach to them that nothing that you are giving them or that your group is doing can fail. I remember that's kind of how I used to go to, I would do like spotlights and stage crew for school plays. Most of those people don't like hearing that, hey, yeah, no, it's just going to be terrible and it's going to be awful. That's how I normally deal with anything going wrong, but the people who are going up and having to talk to each other and remember their lines, that's not what they normally want to do. They don't want to think that, oh, no, what if something does go wrong, because it's just not going to be helpful for them. So I understand that. I understand whenever you're trying to drag somebody into your kind of frame of reference, it's much easier to do that through optimistic and positivity, because it makes it more alluring. It makes it more attractive whenever you do that. And then, like I said before, I kind of started out this whole segment with, in this day and age, positivity, optimism, thinking the best possible thing is going to happen, it's pretty damn easy compared to 100 years ago. You can, most people in this world can do the bare minimum. I shouldn't say in this world, in this country, most people could do the bare minimum that they're required to do, could do shitty work most of their lives, and they're gonna have a life that is better than anyone to like 100 or at least, I mean, even 100 years ago, but think 200 years ago, someone would never even imagine having that kind of luxury around them and that much free time. You don't have to worry that much in this day and age. Optimism is much more statistically backed. Just the idea that you're going to live to old age and that you're not going to be killed in the street by someone. You're not going to get run over by someone who's just angry and is trying to kill you. Now, you might still die by someone on an accident or something like that, but stuff like violence and, like I said before, disease and all these things that we've been working against for years are down. So the idea of not worrying about having the plague hit you is a lot more feasible nowadays than it was a while back. Believing that your children would live past the age of 6 months is a lot more feasible nowadays. So you kind of get my point. Nowadays, in the developed world, especially in the United States, optimism is very persuasive and very much, it's very much supported by just our lives compared to what happens or what has happened in the past. And that just kind of comes where it is just, what do you compare it to? Do you compare your life to the top 1% of people in America, or do you compare it to 99% of people 100 years ago? And if you compare it to 99% of people 100 years ago, your life is fucking gravy. It's golden. As long as you live past the age of 20, you're getting, or past the age of 45 probably, you're getting way better than most of those people did, and you don't have black lung, you don't have a bad back from a manual labor job your entire life, you don't have just gnarled hands from working with them the entire life, you don't drink every single night just to get rid of that kind of pain. So optimism is definitely something where I can, and I have to admit, does seem a lot more, it makes a lot more sense than it ever has before. Now I'm going to do a I'm sorry, I'm going to do an ad here. It's another ad from Chronologic. Again, check them out, but you'll get to hear Daniel's beautiful voice right here. And then when we come back, I'm going to finish out the episode and talk about why I don't necessarily buy all of Optimism's facets and all it's trying to sell people. So enjoy.
Hey guys, today's show is brought to you by Chronologic.network. Chronologic is an Ethereum-based project that aims to solve time-related problems on the blockchain. Through Chronologic's 3 core products, the Ethereum alarm clock, debt smart contracts, and the day token minting mechanism, they solve the problems of payment scheduling, crypto loan time constraints, and unstable token launches. Find out more at Chronologic.network.
All right, now we're back from outer space, and I just came here to look at your face. I don't know. Never mind. Hope you guys liked the ad. Hope you guys liked hearing somebody else's voice. Hopefully you didn't, actually. Hopefully you hate hearing anybody else's voice besides me, because I would love to have that kind of power over people. Again, I don't know. Like I said before the ad break, I want to talk now about the negatives or the bad parts of just kind of blindly believing that things are going to work out and that things are going to always turn out the best for you. And I guess I'll start this off with the least bit of evidence I have, and that's just kind of what I've seen in my life. And it is that many of the people that I've seen in my life, and many of the people that I've worked with, because I have a seasonal type job that I work in the summer, so then the winter is spent kind of on vacation, but then kind of also working small little jobs and jobs where you wouldn't want to spend your entire life, but it's not terrible for doing for like a month or two. Stuff like waiters, line cooks, actually, I was about to say don't worry about it, but if you're a waiter your entire life, unless you're making decent money, if you like it, fine. But most waiters get very bitter. After doing it for too long, they start to think that they're entitled to just tips for doing nothing. I have no real sympathy for waiters too much, just from being around them and from doing the job. It's not that hard. They'll complain that people are shitty, and anybody who works a job anywhere who deals with people is going to deal with shitty people. The cashiers at Walmart deal with way more shitty people daily than somebody in a restaurant, and get ordered around and yelled at. So I don't really buy it. But anyway, a lot of these people and a lot of the people who I've worked with have this, because you kind of need it to get through jobs like that if you're doing it for multiple years, one day I'm going to do this thing and then this thing, and then everything's going to kind of pan out and it's all going to work out for me. It doesn't happen like that. A lot of those people stay in the same spot. A lot of those people a couple of years later are still doing the same thing, or still have still not done that thing that they said was going to make everything work out. And they're kind of left to just continue. And kind of the only thing that makes them get up in the morning and go to the job that they hate at this point is the belief that eventually things will work out. Eventually they'll get their break. Eventually they'll get their ship will come into harbor, and they'll get to have something, whatever it is, amazing happen. Someday they'll get that lottery win that they've always wanted, and then they'll do what they want with their life. They'll travel, but again, that doesn't happen. Just because you believe that you're going to succeed at something, and just because you believe that your job is somehow going to pan out into something else, or you're going to figure out a way out of that. If you have multiple children and you're trying to support them and you already have a job someplace, it's going to be very hard to jump from a job where you're barely supporting yourself to getting an education where then you can support yourself and your family better, because you have that interim where you actually have to do the work to get better at that. Most people didn't do the work in the first place because they don't like doing work. I include myself in that. Most people who don't get things are normally not getting them because they don't try. Whether that's because that can be for multiple different reasons. That can be because they don't have whatever it is, but there is a lot of kind of just, well, I mean, I'm just like, I always see people on Twitter or on Instagram just talking about, yeah, we're out here grinding. And it's like, you work at a McDonald's. What is this grinding? This is not grinding. You're not, where people post rise and grind, and then they'll go into the coffee shop job or something like that. And one day I'm going to be an actress, and one day I'm going to be this great photographer and all this. But none of this stuff really does anything besides just kind of satiate your in-the-moment need to have some kind of pride in your work. None of this optimism doesn't mean anything if you're trying to have pride and you're trying to think everything's going to work out, and then never actually dealing with the reality that maybe you have to change some things in your life or something about yourself, and maybe things won't work out the way things are working now. Maybe things won't work out the way that you're doing things now. Another side of that is where people kind of just believe inherently that, oh, hey, well, they're doing fine. My mom's doing great. My dog's doing great, or whatever. And then you can't help somebody that way. I mean, like I said before, there isn't really, there's so many studies that go back and forth against each other about how optimism and positivity affects your health and how that's pretty dubious. It definitely doesn't help your dog to live longer to just believe that he's going to live longer. I've seen people keep animals around where the animal is pissing itself. It's obviously in pain, but they go, oh no, he's fine. He's great. He's just doing this because like he can walk around. This is great. That's kind of shitty to do, and not to say that you should just put your animals down. I think you have to look at you have to look at certain realities in your life, and you have to realize that sometimes life isn't worth living at a certain point. This is why I'm very much against there being laws against assisted suicide. Some people have lives and have illnesses or have circumstances where you can pump them full of however much painkiller you want and however much things just kind of just numb them, but it's just not good. Like, their quality of life is so low that it's a negative. Just having life and just existing is not a blessing necessarily for everybody. Just having the chance to do things in life is not necessarily always a blessing. If your quality of life is so low that for whatever reason, just being optimistic about your situation, or it's especially worse if you have, or if whoever is in pain or whoever's quality of life is so low that other people around them who have to take care of them are so optimistic that they kind of gloss over the reality that this person would probably be better off dying, would probably be better off not having to be in this kind of constant pain or dealing with these things, because whoever's taking care of them just believes kind of blindly that, hey, this is all going to work out. Hey, your life is always better. It's never a good option to just kill yourself. Life is always going to turn out well. And sometimes it seems like people, it seems like a selfish thing for them to do, because you're kind of keeping that person around or keeping that animal around for you. You're not keeping them around. You're not concerned with their well-being anymore. You're concerned with how it would make you feel if they went away. And optimism and believing that everything will work out for the best can get in the way of that. Optimism can also get in all it kind of does is just bury that, and then whenever the reality kind of just forces itself in your life, it can be much harder to deal with things like that. It can be much harder to deal with death or illness or kind of just the end of any awful thing that you've kind of just been trying to push down, and then it eventually just explodes. And it's sometimes bad to just be optimistic in any given situation, because some situations just don't really have any hope. If you have certain kinds of diseases, shit just doesn't get fixed. I mean, I know I've heard of like certain illnesses, maybe a certain kind of cancer just fixing themselves, but if you're in a situation where daily life is just agony, you can't expect someone like that to just stick around for the sake of, well, maybe something will fix you, maybe it'll just happen. I don't see that as I mean, that gets into like owning your body and why laws shouldn't stop you from doing what you want with your own body. But I think part of that and part of our culture does push a certain optimistic, hey, everything will work out. Hey, you should always think everything's going to work out. And I think that's kind of dangerous, especially whenever you apply it to other people. I think kind of as a wrapping everything up and going off of that and going off of how I was talking about how if you just kind of pile optimism on top of bad things, sometimes things just kind of explode in your face, and all of a sudden you have to deal with everything. Something like acceptance and just kind of acknowledging that this is how life is sometimes. Like I talked about in Stoicism, just going, okay, hey, this is happening, this is occurring, this is something real. And I can't just be blindly hopeful for this. I can't just be blissfully unaware of this happening, or else it's going to cause a problem for me later. And just accepting that sometimes stuff doesn't work out. Sometimes even in the United States in 2018, shit goes wrong. And sometimes you have to deal with that. And sometimes you have to just, like I said, accept that maybe things aren't going to get better. Accept that maybe something bad has happened, and whether or not you can change that or not, you do have to accept that before you can change it. Optimism doesn't really lend itself to change unless you're coming from a situation where you were originally pessimistic or very anti-optimistic. But optimism, if you just do that forever, just believing that the best possible thing is going to happen, that it doesn't give itself to change. It doesn't give itself to adapting to a new situation, accepting that maybe you're wrong. Optimism, blind optimism can just lead you to just doing the same thing for years and years and years and years. That's I've done open mic comedy stuff before, and you'll see these people who have been doing open mics for over 5 years, and they're like, well, someday it's just going to happen. Someday it's going to work out for me. And it's like, no, I mean, maybe it's just not. Maybe you are funny, maybe you're not, but something isn't working here. Something isn't, and maybe it is you have to change something. Maybe it's you have to change into a different job. Sometimes maybe you have to change into a different style. But just having a blind belief in yourself does not give itself to changing yourself, because you believe in what yourself is. So to change that would be to introduce unbelief, which is kind of contrary to the whole idea. So if you can, it's the whole idea of all this and what to take away from optimism is healthy optimism is kind of telling yourself, hey, it's going to work out at least this time. be positive about something, be kind of positive because it lets you get excited about something, it lets you feel good about doing something, but then also realize that optimism and feelings like this don't change realities. And if you gotta get smacked in the face with reality, you have to maybe adjust your thinking. It doesn't mean you have to be negative. That doesn't mean you have to be a pessimist. It's something I've learned over my life, which isn't very long yet. But is that you can't be a pessimist either. You can't just always think things are going to go wrong, or else you won't, the same thing, you won't change things. You'll kind of just stay the same because it doesn't matter. Both optimism and pessimism end up, if you follow them completely, just end up meaning that nothing matters. Whether it's going to be good or bad, completely separate from what I do. You need to have kind of like a healthy dose of... You need to have a healthy version of optimism, meaning, like I said, be focused, be excited about things, be even enamored with things, but don't let your feelings get in the way of what you can know and what you can understand logically. Don't let your feelings kind of then just overrule those. So I guess that's what you can take from this whole rambling mess. But I'm not being optimistic. That's what you can take from this amazing string of prose and prophetic teachings that I've given to you over the last 41 minutes. And I hope that I know that this will change your life for the better. And I know that this will impart wonderful things into your life and make everything better. But no, thank you guys for listening. Again, get me on Twitter at BakersDozen93. Let me know if you liked the episode. Let me know if you hated it. Let me know if you have any suggestions. And thanks again for listening. I guess I can't say that I wouldn't do it without you, but it makes it nicer to do knowing that somebody at least will listen. So keep up with that. Again, check out Zach Vol's episodes called The Coin Pod. He always does interviews on that. It's very crypto-centric. And those come out Tuesday. And then check us out on ymbbtc.com/live. And you can get in with the conversation. You can kind of chat and hang out with us. And we do that every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And it's kind of just a fun hang. So see you guys then. Thanks again. Bye.